Good evening, I'm Jeanette Liu, live in the Sun TV studio. Here are your Wednesday hot topics.
University students march on Queen's Park to protest tuition fees. Is the next generation of professionals being saddled with too much debt? Plus, more than 100 Canadian suspects are ID'd in an international child porn bust. How can you protect your kids from online predators? Remember, we want your thoughts, your pics, your videos on these stories and more at newlive.ca. You send it, the world gets it.
These fee increases are going to result in 20 to 36% increases in fees over the next 4 years. We want to contribute to our economy and to our society, but we're being blocked by McGuinty's tuition fee increases.
Welcome to Canoe Live. Hundreds of post-secondary students held a lively rally at Queen's Park today, protesting high tuition fees. It was all part of a national day of action organized by the Canadian Federation of Students, who are angry over government's broken promises and say today's students are being saddled with crippling debt. Well, joining me now is the man you just saw in that clip, Jesse Greener, chairman of the Ontario Federation of Students, and Holly Backus is a fourth-year Ryerson journalism student who's also freelancing for the Toronto Sun. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, Jesse, I'm going to start with you. What do you hope today's rally will accomplish?
Well, today's rally is really a punctuation point in a 365-day, a year-long campaign to have the provincial government recognize the fact that saddling students with massive amounts of debt in the forms of big tuition fee increases like the McGuinty government has leveled against us this fall is not on. It's not on with students, and we know that from vote after vote on campuses where over 90% of students say that tuition fees are too high and should be reduced. But we also know that it's not on with the general public. And if the McGuinty government wants to get back in line with Ontarians, the voters, not the students necessarily, but the voters in general, then it needs to do better than the current policy to increase tuition fees.
Now, Holly, you wrote a column in today's Toronto Sun with your own protest. So what are your problems with this demonstration?
Well, I think we saw an outpouring of advertising. Lots of money being spent on YouTube videos, Facebook groups,
YouTube
countless
videos are free.
posts. Fine, yeah, okay, that's fine. But there were tons of posters, thousands of brochures, tons of it. And I think we have to look at it as the way that the money is being spent. I mean, we have. In my school, I go to Ryerson. You have the RSU spending money on it, and you have the Canadian Federation of Students spending money on exactly the same thing. So I think what we got to look at is the way that student unions are spending our money. If we are calling for lower tuitions and they're spending thousands upon thousands of dollars, maybe, you know, we should be looking at how we can decrease our tuition ourselves.
Jesse, does Holly have a point here?
Of course not. I mean, we are doing we are doing exactly what Holly is saying, which is looking to decrease tuition fees ourselves. The Federation, the Canadian Federation of Students, and local students' unions like the Ryerson Students' Union and many, many more across the province and country, they're taking matters into their own hands by exactly pressuring the government. And if we don't put ourselves, our voices together and combine our very limited resources together to amass a campaign against a very well-heeled political force, which is, of course, the government and its bankrolled buddies, then we've got nothing. So we're doing exactly that. We are bringing that voice to Ontarians, and our message is being received very well. In fact, it's not our message anymore. It's Ontarians' message. And when we see poll results saying that 3 out of every 4 Ontario voters are calling for the McGuinty government to reinstate the freeze because they see this as a broken promise by cancelling the freeze, then we know that we're on the right track and we're doing the right thing.
Well, Holly, how would you like to see the union spend your fees?
I'd like to just mention something. I don't really see it as a broken promise. I'm not a big fan of the McGuinty government, but I think we should mention that the tuition freeze is only promised for 2 years. In terms of how I'd like to see our tuition fees used, first of all,
Look, Holly, I mean, we all know that you're actually running for the campus Conservatives as the president, and it doesn't surprise me that you might not agree with the principles of the Canadian Federation of Students and students in general, because you know, your top-down policy from your paymasters, the Conservatives are not in line. The principles are not in line with what students are saying, and that's okay. You can have that opinion, but please don't masquerade as a rank-and-file student who is concerned about their students' union, because students are behind what we're doing. Students are fully supportive supportive of what we're doing.
Jesse, to be honest with you, if we're going to talk about top-down government, let's talk about the CFS and the RSU.
Well, they're not governments; they're students' unions,
Fine.
and they're
Well,
doing
let's talk about
the will of students.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about on democratic practices going on at universities.
The conservatives,
so if you
the
want to
campus
get into
conservatives,
that.
trying to overtake elections just about 4 years ago, and that was broken in the media. You know, pouring resources in to try to facilitate conservatives taking over our students' unions. I mean, I don't think you really have a leg to stand on. But what we're talking about is getting students mobilized and helping them mobilize themselves to effectively take on the government. That's a big task, and we're happy to say that despite a handful of conservatives who are running campaigns like Holly is to try to get herself elected, we're doing a great job.
Let me ask Jesse this. I mean, the Ontario Minister of Training Colleges and Universities say grants have tripled in recent years, and student assistance is up. So how much more needs to be done to make students happy?
Well, look, without a tuition fee freeze or protection on tuition fees, the value of those grants are decreasing every day. Without tuition fee protection in the form of freezes and reductions, loan limits, which are going up, are causing students to go into greater debt. We cannot have an effective financial aid policy when we have tuition fees increasing. But beyond that, the new money that the government's patting itself on the back for injecting into the system, and frankly, they're probably getting a sore shoulder from doing that, is being outpaced by tuition fee increases, $1.30 for every dollar invested. So we need to have stronger policy that hits the core issue, which is stopping tuition fees from increasing.
What do you think of all this?
What do I think about what?
What just Jesse had to say exactly. I mean, does it bother you? You say you've got scholarships and loans. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those students who have a whole lot of money in the bank that I can spend on tuition, so I've had to look towards OSAP to do that. I come from a single mother home, and but I have had access to education. I'm going to my 4th year. I'm leaving soon. And I mean, as a student who's leaving soon and looking for an employment shortly, I mean, we also have to look at the taxpayer's role in this, and I certainly don't want to see my taxes go up when I'm looking for employment. So we also have to
You'll probably get an appointment with the Conservative Party. I wouldn't worry about that.
We also have to consider the fact that if we're going to be, subsidizing education even more, that money is coming from the taxpayer.
Well, we're subsidizing it less, actually, and that's the problem. Less and less government funding is going into post-secondary education.
Jesse, Holly, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but we can't thank you enough for being here and having this discussion. We'll have to see what kind of impact these rallies actually have, but thank you both for talking with us tonight.
Thank you for having me here today.
Jesse Greener is with the Ontario Federation of Students, and Holly Backus is a Ryerson student and freelance writer. Well, how would you fund post-secondary education? Roll back tuition, more grants and loans? What's your solution? Let us know what you think at sendit@canoelive.ca. We're going to take a break now, but we'll be back in 60 seconds.